welcome back to the So What podcast. Today we have a very special edition. We have our first repeat guest as well, Teves. Teves, welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, for sure. As some of you might be aware, there's a big rap beef going on, and Teves and I have been chatting offline about it, and we thought we'd bring the conversation over to the podcast.
Yeah, we've been yapping on about it for the last few days, so I'm excited to talk about it a little more.
Yeah, it's funny though, like you were like, I don't think we can talk that much more about it. And then we went on and on and on. And then today I woke up and I was like, is there really anything else to say? And I guess I'll lead up with something that I shared with you that you said, oh, I hadn't heard that before, because I heard somebody today just say it. And it's the idea of we've entered this nuclear era of rap beef. And I shit you not, I heard video commentary of what's going on, and the guy was like, yeah, these guys are just dropping nukes like left and right. And I was like, wow, okay, I guess it is becoming a part of the consciousness.
Yeah, I think the way you framed it though was a little bit different though, because the way you framed it was like the direct analogy to like literally like the rest, like all the other countries having nukes as well, and like mutual mass destruction in a way. So like, I don't know, I feel like that term of saying like, oh, dropping nukes is like kind of more common than the way that you framed it, I thought. Because when you said like, yeah, just keeping it a little bit more ambiguous the way you did, kind of like, I don't know, maybe my imagination just ran wild with it, but it was a pretty cool thing when you said that. I was like, that's a good point, actually. But the way you framed it too was like beyond just the bars or the tracks, like you framed it in a way where like accessibility to information, the internet, like social media, like we're in a nuke era in terms of like you could, well, potentially like in the entertainment industry was the other thing we framed too, like you could drop a track or say something and basically that's hitting the nuke on somebody's career potentially.
It really is. And I think a lot of that has to do with as you mentioned, technology, the rapid speed in which people can record and get things out there. And then even I was just watching and reading the comments of Metro's BBL Drizzy and how people were just chiming in about it. And so like he basically said, anyone who has beef with Drake, here's your shot, go for it. And to be able to, in a way, weaponize an art form in such a way, it's kind of crazy. And I think it's crazy to me because historically, and we talked briefly about this too, hip hop, the four pillars of it are founded in competition. And previously there have been some pretty intense beefs, which have led to people losing their lives, unfortunately. But when you look at it, it's pretty common for DJs to, drop mixes or try different things on the same track. It's common to have dancers, face off and try to one up each other in front of crowds. And usually it's friendly for the most part. But where we are currently with the state of the world and the state of hip hop, and I think in some ways the amount in which a character like Drake has offended people, it's just ripe for something super heavy that you hope there's learning on all sides of it for humanity.
Yeah. I mean, to kind of like, piggyback on some of what you're saying, like, I think beefs in the past, for the most part, have been mostly superficial. Like, it's been challenging other people's tracks, things they've said in songs. I mean, I guess Tupac and Biggie went at each other's character pretty badly, going back and forth about having intercourse with someone else's wife and blah, blah, blah. But like, I feel like this is the first time where at this scale, I guess, it's gone to a very dark personal place, because Pusha did it to Drake before, really. Like, he exposed Drake's child that nobody knew about. But what I was thinking about yesterday was like, Drake was able to come back from that, like he was able to finesse his way out of that and like maintain his top spot still, which is just kind of shows you the caliber of artist, I guess he is. Maybe not even artist, but entertainer, like how you were saying yesterday. But like thinking on it, and of course this is like hindsight, right? But like Kendrick is probably the only rapper who could potentially knock him off that top spot. Like even if Cole went at Drake, I don't think this would happen. I don't think Cole would have gotten to this point of how how dark and deep all of this beef and drama is. But yeah, like I think Kendrick's the only guy, honestly, who could really knock him off that spot.
Yeah, he went really cerebral with it. I was listening a couple times to Not Like Us, and then I was listening to Drake's tracks out of this. You had told me to listen to
The Heart Part 6.
Yeah, and I was listening to that, and then I got what she meant by near the end of it. It sounded like he was like, yeah, you would have been a worthy competitor, and then he had that line, which was like, if you didn't like go at me, I'm gonna butcher it, but where he rhymed it with predator, right? And then that's what Kendrick's been coming out with it. And then Kendrick just like dropped the sledgehammer after that one, right? Like I saw what she meant by how perhaps this was an exit. And, you look at how it's creeping into real life. I just saw a report that said a third trespasser on Drake's property, which that's kind of scary, Certainly over the years, I'm not the hugest Drake fan. I shared that with you. And part of you mentioned it earlier. I think Drake's a phenomenal entertainer. Do I think he's legitimately this character that he's portraying? Probably not. And, honestly, I'll never know the guy, and most likely I'll never meet Kendrick Lamar either. So really all we have to take and digest are kind of what we see, what they feed to the public, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at it, and this is kind of what we were discussing, I think the authenticity, Kendrick as an artist, I think his artistry, a lot of it is rooted in who he is. Whereas Drake as an artist, I think a lot of it's rooted in character. And he's been playing this character for so long. And he certainly has had some really, catchy bangers over the year, right? Like there'd be times where I'd hear something and I'd be like, oh, sounds really good, but it's Drake, and then that'd be like my conflict, right? Because it's like, I don't feel like I can really kind of connect with this guy.
Can't buy into it, right?
Just something not real, and truthfully, and you and I think in a separate conversation we talked about this. I think hip hop is the voice of the music of multiple generations, generations before me, my generation, your generation, generations behind us. And I think a lot of that is because the emotions that are being portrayed and conveyed, you can relate to that. And with Kendrick, while I don't relate to his life experiences, I think what he shares about the state of humanity and the challenges that he feels, the feeling behind it, that's relatable. Whereas with Drake, a lot of it's sort of like this petty, dramatic caricature kind of stuff that, while entertaining, it's like you have the king in the court and you have the court jester, and it's like they decided to square off against each other, and then boom, that's kind of like where we're at right now, watching the fallout of all of that. Or maybe a better analogy would be like you have the sage in the court who keeps his mouth shut, but the jester's just been going at him, and everyone in the court, all the other characters are kind of like, what, when is somebody gonna like just get rid of the king or get rid of the jester? And in this case, maybe the king and the queen, the royalty, it's the audience, right? And then the different court members. Now I'm weaving in my weird metaphors, but the court members are different members in hip hop, and that's why you have so many of them coming at them. You got like the knights, you got the cooks, you got everyone coming from all out of the woodworks. And Drake
I think the court member at this point is the culture, really. Yeah. Like, because Kendrick dropped that bar in one of the tracks. I can't even remember at this point. I've been consuming everything at such a rapid rate, but he did drop a bar basically saying like the culture is against him, is against Drake.
Yeah, it's wild, as much as I might not be a fan of Drake, it's almost like a cautionary tale, and I can't help as a human but feels some degree of empathy. Now granted, on the other side of the coin, if what Kendrick is saying is true, then he deserves all of it.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, I tend to have a unwarranted like belief that everything catches up to us at some point. Like most of us get what we deserve at some point in time. Obviously, it doesn't always stand true, but within certain limitations, I feel like that is typically the case. I mean, the funny thing is, so I don't know if I'm segueing a bit or drifting away from it, but like one of the things I've been thinking about a lot in this whole beef is like, especially at this point of it, and I think that Kendrick has obliterated Drake in every facet of the beef. Artistically, like every track he's dropped is a completely different style, completely different type of production. He's using his different voices. I mean, and then of course his lyricism is pretty much amongst the best ever. So I think in that side, he's already crushed him. In the amount of drama he's exposed, completely crushed him. And I just don't see how anybody comes back from this.
Yeah. I mean, I think part of what also spurred this, right, is I sent you that video where someone made like if there was like a movie epilogue,
Oh
right?
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah. That was
you know,
super funny too.
it's kind of visualizing like what happens to Drake next. And you know, this is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to rise from the ashes and come back with maybe even some greater work. Because I think a lot of times really phenomenal art and work can come from pain, can come from tragedy.
Mm-hmm.
And who knows what types of pains and tragedy someone like Drake has experienced in his life in general. But I got to think that something like this would really rock a person's core. And if there's some semblance of goodness in there, so that we could see something really good come from it, or taking a step back, right, could be like what Cat Williams said when he went on Shannon Sharp's show earlier, and is saying 2024 is the year. It's where everything's going to come out, people are going to fall. I mean, well, I don't even know the timeline at this stage, but earlier this year we had everything with Diddy, which is still playing out.
Yep.
Kendrick is basically framed Drake in the same light as Harvey Weinstein. I mean, it's
and Kendrick just
crazy.
exposed that in the last not even 2 weeks.
Yeah,
In the last week he exposed that. So like who knows what the ripple effects of that is going to be 6 months from now.
exactly. 100%.
Because like if you look at the Diddy timeline, it tracks over the course of years, but like for whatever reason he got fully like investigated this year.
Look at R.
Like,
Kelly.
who knows? Yeah.
I mean, R. Kelly people came at R. Kelly for decades, and then it finally unraveled for him.
Chappelle show happened like what? A long time ago, like 17 years ago.
20 R. Kelly years ago, actually. Yeah.
So like that skit came out and we all had a laugh at it, But I don't know, man. It's going to be quite interesting. I'm not saying it's impossible. I just do not see the path out of this for Drake. Doesn't matter how big of a artist he is or entertainer, but like, and the other thing I've been saying too is like the higher you rise, the harder you fall. Like Drake's been sitting at the top untouched for over a decade. Like he's just going to have the hardest fall of them all, honestly.
Yeah. And it kind of reminds me of, they say the first time you get knocked out, the easier it is to get knocked out each time after that, right? Because basically your brain sits within your skull, and then the first time that you get knocked out, I guess that however it's sitting, it's looser, it's easier to get knocked out. That's how I've heard it. Another thing could be the more we do the same things or go through the same things, our bodies adapt. I've seen people in jiu-jitsu get put to sleep because they didn't tap, and it seems like each time that they don't do that, you can get put to sleep quicker and quicker and quicker. So it's going to be interesting. I got to think he's still relatively young, so he's probably not going to walk away from music or entertainment forever. And who knows, maybe he's going to go lean back into like that heartfelt, and offer an honest apology. I think we live in a world where if, like, let's say Kendrick took it to an extreme, Drake is not a pedophile, right? Like, let's just say that. Then maybe Drake goes, he does some reflection, learns from the errors of his ways, and changes. And people are gonna like be hard on him and watch him, but over the course of time, he changes. There could be a comeback for that. Like, and I think there's a lot of room in history where people who have been convicted of terrible things or been viewed in negative lights um, have able been overcome. I'm wearing a an artist's rendering of a memory for Kobe, right? Like, look at the stuff Kobe went through, and then Kobe
That's a sick shirt.
came out on the other side.
Oh,
Shout out
with
to you.
Gigi's number on it too. That's sick.
Yeah, I'll send it to you later because I'll show you the back's super dope. You see that?
Dope.
Yeah. So our local artist Poncho, he's doing a whole series, call it the GOAT series. He's got this sick MJ one too. So he's just going through the whole thing. But somebody like Kobe, like he was never able to shake that experience that happened early in his career, whether it was true or not. And we live in an era where you can go and you can read court documents. I mean, it's all kinds of crazy, right? So Kobe somehow came out on the other side. Another one, Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson came out on the other side. Mike, I think, is in many ways, I think people view Mike as sort of like this beloved uncle figure. Mike's going to go into this fight against Jake Paul, who people hate. And I mean, I'm right there with everybody else, hoping that, Mike doesn't get hurt as a much younger person or a much older person, but also that he, cleans Jake Paul's clock, because the Paul brothers, I mean, those guys are something else, man.
Well, you want to share your analogy? So Jason had an analogy with Jake Paul and Drake in one of our conversations that I think you should mention in here, because it was kind of funny when you brought it up. It was like, I guess it's kind of true. It only just goes in the lens of where Drake is sitting right at this moment, not just anything before.
It just goes to Logan Paul is to YouTube like Drake Logan is to hip hop in a way, and that's because they're very clearly really smart on the entertainment business marketing aspect. That was my cat trying to make a suicide dive across. If you heard that,
dude, okay.
I wish people could have seen it, because I just saw the tail end of it of her trying to land on my leg and then not trying to look cool. But
playing it off.
Yeah. It's So
is that Laws of Human Nature?
It's the 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. I have a number of Robert Greene's books. Truthfully, I haven't read them cover to cover because it's pretty dense. It's hard to, but every now and again I to go and make my way through them, because I think there's honestly some pretty interesting information in there that you can digest and apply to your daily life.
I've gone through 48 Laws of Power and Laws of Human Nature. That's a really dense one. Laws of Human Nature took me like 3 months to read.
And that one, it's different than 48 Laws and the Strategies of War one, right? How it's laid out.
Yeah, I mean, similar, but definitely different, because it's not so like bullet pointed, like kind of how like 48 Laws is.
Did you see the one he did with 50 Cent?
I have. I'd never really read it though. The I forget what it's called, but I think it's
called the 50th Law.
The 50th Law. That's what it is. Yeah.
I had a hard time with that one. I didn't finish that one, actually. I picked it up and I tried, but I can't even tell you, and I don't remember much from it.
Yeah.
But going back to
Logan Paul, Drake.
Going back to Logan, going back to Drake, their characters, right? Like, who are they really? And I think, honestly, a lot of the reason people don't like them is because of the characters that they portray, and then the behavior outside. It's hard to cheer for someone like that.
Yeah,
I mean, you can only give someone a pass for so long before the act gets old, I think. And I think there's a number of instances where people, especially from the fan aspect of it, are very embracing of these heroic figures, in a sense, who have achieved levels of success and mastery in their crafts and their fields. But you also have people who achieve that, but then it's almost like there's this false sense of humility that that they take with it, or it changes them, and there's a lot of cliche expressions like, money's the root of all evil, like power corrupts. And I think it's true. I think depending on when people come into those kind of things, it can really shape the outcome of their experience, and then in terms how they interact with the community.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I'm sure you probably heard a quote similar to this, but something about like, like money doesn't change who you are. It just amplifies who you truly are. So like, basically if you get rich and you're an asshole all of a sudden, you've probably been an asshole the whole time. Now you're just an asshole with money and more power, Yeah. But the thing that I wanted to segue into earlier, which I realized if I did earlier in the conversation would have been a pretty wide jump, but like I am in the other camp in terms of like being a fan of Drake's. Like I listened to Drake's. I came across Drake back in the MySpace days, and I used to put all my music on MySpace back in the day. So like I felt that relation, and then watching him explode kind of like definitely inspired me along my journey as a hip hop artist. Like, whatever, blindly believing that maybe one day I could pull that off. But yeah, I more or less, I've had a slightly up and down journey as far as being a fan of Drake's, but for the most part, I've been a pretty big fan of his over the years. And the funny thing is, like, with all of this going on now, like, I find myself skipping Drake songs. I don't want to play his music. I definitely want to drive around in my car with the windows down playing the music, because I do that all the time. Yesterday I was listening to one of Bryson Tiller's albums, and I was just letting it run. Big fan of Bryson Tiller, but then like it got to this track and it started playing, and I was in the middle of driving. I was distracted, but then I was like noticed I was bopping my head, and then like I was like, wait, this sounds like Drake. And then I looked down at my Apple CarPlay, and boom, I see featuring Drake. I was like, skip, next song. And that's from me admitting that, like, openly, like, I've been mostly a pretty big Drake fan over the years, and that's how I feel about coming across his music. And just think about all the other people who are like that now, who are questioning their commitment to like him, even just his craft, not even him as a person, right? And it's funny because yesterday I popped open HBO Max and I was just checking out, like, trying to find something to watch later on, but they're going to be dropping a Kevin Spacey documentary. Now, we're going to talk about somebody who fell off, got exposed, and completely canceled out, like, so like, I think, and you brought up the comparison to like Kobe and some other athletes, but I think it's important to note that the stark difference between entertainment and competitive sports is so different in terms of like, especially when it comes to like scandalous stuff, and then to branch that one step further, even within the entertainment category, the subgenre of being a rapper is also far different than just being any other entertainer, because your entire reputation is mostly built, or your entire like clout is built on, more than anything, your reputation and your image. And I've just never seen a rapper get exposed by an equal or possibly higher tier rapper. I'll say equal at the very least in terms of Kendrick and Drake, but for one of them to expose the other one like that, like, how do you come back from that?
I think the only example that I can think of, granted I'm a little bit older than you, but it's when Ja Rule had beef with pretty much everybody, and then he just got blasted, and then it was like Ja Rule just fell off, and then Ja Rule came back, and it was like he was involved in that big
the Fire Island scandal,
festival scandal, and then it sounded like he got taken advantage based on all of that. But I think that's the only other comparison in hip hop, and that's a good point, because in entertainment, it does seem with entertainers there's a point of no return, whereas with like pro athletes, it's almost like they get it passed, and
they can outwork their scandal to an extent, right? Like they can win, they can bring championships to their city that kind of like will help people to kind of forget about that, because they're enjoying seeing like this winning streak going on. But like in entertainment, it's tough, because like that's the thing about Kevin Spacey, right? It's like, I watched Seven a few months ago, with Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman, right? The Head in the Box, and Kevin Spacey's the lead
You
antagonist
just
in it.
gave away a massive spoiler, by the way.
It's all right.
Somebody needs to
But what I'm about to point out, though, is another point to it, though, is like, although I love that movie, it's a fantastic movie, it was like still kind of like, it felt cringy to watch every time he popped up on my TV. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
dude. Yeah.
Like House of Cards was a great show, but like, and I never got to finish it, but like, I'm not really interested in going back to it anymore because of all of that. And that's the
Yeah.
difference between being an entertainer on your TV screen or in your headphones and on your speaker versus being being a top athlete, I guess, you know.
Yeah,
And there's
that's
certain
a
scandals you can't escape as an athlete regardless. Like Aaron Hernandez, there's a bunch of messed up things that you just can't get out of.
OJ. Yeah, no,
But
you're
like
right.
the questionable things, you know, where it's his word versus her word type of thing, like you could escape that with the right amount of velocity in terms of like fucking
It's
winning, basically.
that's a really, really good observation that you share, because yeah, you're 100% right. Like, as you're talking about Kevin Spacey, I'm taking to Usual Suspects, right? Which at one
Mm,
point was considered one of the best movies ever and
yeah.
had such a crazy plot twist, you know?
We
And his acting in that at the time was, so many people were blown away by it. But then you go and you like hear these creepy stories and it's kind of like, oh, what's going on? Now that said, look at and I don't know how to say his name, but Shia LaBeouf.
mm,
He's had a lot of interesting things thrown at him. I think one of his exes, I read this interview, FK Twigs, she talked about for years the abuse that she suffered from being in that relationship, like haunted her, right? And he's still out there. He's still doing things. I don't know if you followed anything with the bitter divorce between Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt, but the allegations against Brad Pitt are pretty bad, but Brad Pitt's, if anything, has been still out there, still very much a public figure. So it's
still
really
crushing it,
interesting.
to be honest.
It's
Absolutely
it's
crushing still.
yeah. So it's so interesting, kind of how we determine who's gonna get a pass and who won't, and what lines are okay, what aren't. It's really it's almost like an unlucky lottery, you know.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure there's even more people that are doing crazy shit, but is the awareness or the knowledge going to be shined upon it,
All I'll
who knows?
say, without exposing too much or myself too much, but all I know is that I am privy to some people who are very well connected, especially in the hip hop industry, with amongst top artists. And I have heard some incredibly disturbing stories about what goes on in that world.
Interesting.
We've all been exposed to like all the different things that they say happens in Hollywood. I would assume those things to be true. And this is the
Yeah,
messed
that's
up. This is going to be a very pessimistic part of our conversation, but like, yeah, you just don't know what to believe, so and you just choose to not believe anything at all. Like,
my wife frames it as and this isn't so much about this, but this has more to do with like conspiracy theories and controversy in general. And she's just like, you know what? Just believe anything, because like it's not surprising. And for a long time, I think what got me in life is when things actually did surprise me, and I, I'm still like, if I'm surprised by something, I'm kind of blown away by it, because I feel like we've grown up in, and we live in such a culture and a media landscape where there's so much emphasis on negativity. And that's why, like the passion project that we're working on, like the kind of work that we do separately, that's why I think it's so important, because we're trying to like shine light in different ways, because if you were to just listen to all the media bullshit, it's basically a dark world. Don't ever leave. And if you have a kid, don't ever leave them out of your sight, because there's a lot of really bad, crazy stuff out there. And let's be honest, there are. But that said, there's also a lot of really amazing, good, awesome things in the
Mm-hmm.
world too, and reasons we should be out there celebrating and enjoying life. So it's really an interesting kind of juxtaposition that we find ourselves in this era.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's another philosophy I tend to follow. I don't know if I came up with it on my own, but it's like, you know, if you believe it, then it tends to be true, you know? So like, right? Like, I'll just leave it at that, because the reason why I came up with that idea was not like something I probably want to share on a larger scale, but you know, same thing with the news, right? Like, if you read it and you believe it, then I feel like it becomes real regardless, you know, to within certain boundaries, but some things that goes a lot deeper in and becomes, I don't know if it's self-prophecy or self-fulfilling or not, but um you know, so if you choose to see beauty in the world, then it really exists. I guess that's the thing, you know. But if you choose to only look at things as a like very dark view, then like that's just what your world becomes, you know. So
Yeah,
I
it's
agree. Like
interesting.
dancing in the middle, not being completely ignorant of either side, I think is very difficult to maintain. Like that's that balance, or one form of balance. But it's also like probably one of the most important, because if you always live your life believing that something evil is always going to happen, then, you know, if you believe it long enough, eventually you're going to be right, you know. But same thing about like if you just live your life where everything's just beautiful, magnificent, and just wonderful, then like, I don't know, eventually something terrible will happen, and how will you be able to like handle that, you know?
Yeah, no, I used to think of balance in the sense of being able to have one foot in the light, one foot in the dark, and to be able to stand there in the middle and to be able to walk. Because when we live in an extreme, we will swing from extreme to extreme. You know,
Mm-hmm.
with great highs, there are great lows, and so I think being able to see the balance, to kind of just be there in the middle, weather any storm, that's really important. And I think where we can transcend, in a sense, would be, and that to help us to find the beauty, it'd be to really cultivate that space for gratitude. So if you're given a challenge, it's like, rather than just like, woe is me, you know, and like get caught up like in all of it. It's sort of like taking the pause. I'm like, all right, this is where I am. I'm not going to be here forever, but I'm grateful for this challenge because I'm going to grow from it. And I think some of that just comes just like the repetition of life and going through falling down so many times and getting back up. So, you know, taking it back to this beef aspect of it, I think if, provided that Drake and these claims against Drake and the receipts that people are throwing up all over are true, if he is able to somehow like be humble in his comeback, it's possible. Like it anything's possible. But I
Yeah.
agree, it's hard to see. And you know, to your earlier point too, about the music aspect, how you know, and I shared this example with you offline. Um, I was a huge Kanye fan, early Kanye through much of Kanye's career, and then even when he became Ye and Yeezy, there was a lot of really phenomenal work that he did. And then in the last couple of years, it's like he just spun out, you know, and to the point where I I like Boost, and in the Yeezy shoes that has
Mm-hmm.
the most, probably the best Boost cushioning in the shoes that are out there. You know, and it's like, I don't think I can ever wear those again. And if I do, what am I representing? What am I supporting? And then even like listening to the music, like what you were saying earlier, like should we be listening to it? And that goes back into the age old question: how do you separate the artist from the art? Look at Michael Jackson. Mike,
Yep.
things followed him throughout his life, and then even beyond,
To
you know,
this
into the
day.
grave. And yeah, people are still listening to his music. It's wild. Yeah, I remember when he passed, I had a friend who on Kauai, and I remember going up and spending some time up there. And then the whole trip that I was up there, like all he was listening to was Michael Jackson, you know? And it's just it's wild. It's so wild. And what's make it, I think what makes it challenging too is for many people, art, especially music, it's connected to core memories that they have in the journey of their life, right? In whatever season they were earlier. So I'm sure for a lot of people, especially with like Drake, there's a lot of coming of age to Drake music. There's a lot of reflection, a lot of different things that took place, right? So how he moves from this will be really interesting. And granted, there's some other playbooks that are out there. You know, they hire people with that kind of money can hire teams, you know, whether it be PR specialists or therapists or all kinds of different, you know, things that I don't even know might exist that can image consultants who can like help people move beyond these type of situations. But since we're still in it, like the fallout zone of it, and who knows, is the battle truly over? You know, it's been some days since something dropped, but
I think
we don't know.
I think Kendrick put the nail in the coffin, in my opinion, because like I think the Heart Part 6 is the end of the lyrical exchange. I think, because I mean, I pulled up the lyrics, I'm looking at them right now, and it's in my opinion the whole track is just a joke. Like he's basically saying that all the information that Kendrick exposed, like that Drake and his team, like they planted all that for him to use against him. I think that's bullshit. I'm calling bullshit on all that. Like he says right here, we plotted for a week and then fed you the information. A daughter that's 11 years old, I bet he takes it. We thought about giving a fake name or a destination, but you're so thirsty, you're not concerned with the investigation. Like, I don't believe that. I don't believe that you give them the ammo, especially something like that. Let's make him believe I have a fake daughter to expose me to, and like bait him into that. Like that makes no sense to me. The other stuff he says is it's just basically the whole part about him. This Epstein angle was the shit I expected. TikTok videos he collected and dissected. He's basically taking the things that Kendrick said about him and denying them. Like he's no longer on the attack at all. He's fully on his back, on the back of his heels, and trying to like twist the things that came out about him as like I set that up. That's bullshit. That's bullshit. That's just not how you conduct yourself in a battle like this. Like you come back at him with more and harder shit. That's always how a beef works. You don't dial back and like start saying like no. Like I did all that on purpose. Like I set you up to say those things about me. That's bullshit. There's never been a beef that went that way ever. So I think this is the end of it, and I'm guessing there's a potential that Kendrick saw this track, heard this track, and was like, it's done. I killed him off already. Like this beef is done. And now what he should do is focus on his album that is supposed to drop in the coming months. Because that I'm calling it right now, it's probably gonna be his best selling album ever. I'm not saying it's his best album ever, but it'll probably be his most widely received album in terms of attention that he's ever dropped. Because all eyes are on Kendrick Lamar now. Like he buried Drake, he stomped him, and now he's just standing on top of the entire food chain, like untouched, completely untouched. And it's funny, think back to like Control. Remember the Control verse with Big Sean? Like looking at what Kendrick's doing right now, like he literally just took over the entire rap game right now. It's crazy. Like, you know, the fact we're having this conversation and recording it and hopefully share it with other people. I never thought I would do this. I'm not even kidding.
That's a good point.
Never thought. I texted you the other day. I said like I never thought I'd be this excited about hip hop ever again. You know, like
it's definitely exciting, and hopefully it'll be something good for the culture. Like I was reading an article. It was interesting. I mentioned to you the other day that I saw something where Questlove wasn't stoked about it, right? And then
you said that he had mentioned like this is the death of hip hop or something.
Yeah, there was something that I saw where there's an article where he's like, you know what, like the state that we're in right now, I think it's like the death. Don't quote me on that. I need to look that up. But basically that was something that was put out there, and really it came down to he was just critical of it and wasn't feeling it. And now Black Thought was in an interview and he actually commended J. Cole for the apology. So I think some of it has to do with sort of like where
Interesting. What
those
interview was
two.
that? Because Black Thought is in my top 5, top 3 all time.
I saw it on Complex.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I think what's interesting there, if you look at it, Black Thought and Questlove are, I don't know if they're still close in real life, but colleagues,
But I
have worked
still think
together
they play
for
together on Jimmy
a number
Fallon.
of times. So, legendary Roots crew.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it just shows a peek into where they are, where they're at in that page of the history, right? And that's more than, they're more than entitled to like that opinion. I think you got and that viewpoint. And maybe some of that's because they are a little bit older and they've experienced other things and they're thinking about it from a standpoint of like what's really important, and I think what's problematic about this beef and why it delves into like that nuclear type of thing is these are some, to what you said earlier. I mean, Pac went pretty hard at Biggie, but
Vice versa too. Biggie said some horrible things too.
But that also was the era of East Coast versus West Coast. So there were some other things in there. Like these were like some pretty terrible character accusations on both sides. Like both sides threw some things out there. But I think what's eerie about it is exactly what you said. Like Drake's being defensive now as opposed to being offensive. And
dude, well, sorry, keep going. I'm gonna find the most awkward line. Oh, the one where he says like I'm about to break a nail or something. Do you remember that line? Because when he said that, I was listening and I heard him say that. I was like, that was like the most awkward. Like, what are you talking about? I'm about to break a nail on it or something. He says, I forget it, but I remember like trying to like vibe out and like, ooh, all right, he's about to drop some bars and he starts saying shit like that. And I'm like, what? Bad timing, bro. Bad timing. And it's funny. A lot of people are saying like a lot of artists and shit are saying like his writers just did him dirty. Like whoever's writing his bars for him is not like, is just plugging in some like really off-putting stuff in it.
I think he didn't come into this prepared, like someone like Kendrick.
I don't think you can prepare. Like Cole would have got eaten alive by Kendrick. That's why Cole. One of the reasons why Cole probably got out of it, amongst however many others. But
if
I've
you think
heard a few
about it,
other
right,
reasons too. But
look at the rapid fire in which like Kendrick was able to release things. So if he was plotting this and thinking about this for some time, I wonder if he also had tracks aimed at J. Cole. And
possibly,
since Cole dropped
bars
out,
and verses.
well, and since he dropped out of it, like it's kind of interesting to sort of see. You know what got me was
he completely left him out of it too. Basically, he dropped one bar that had Cole's name in it, but it wasn't even like going at Cole at all. He completely left. It went just from him jumping at the, fuck the big three is just big me, and I like that with Future. Like that was the first one. That's the bar that got J. Cole offended, and he dropped the might delete like later or whatever. And then he pumped the brakes. I think you mentioned it too in one of our conversations, but the word on the street is that Schoolboy Q is the one who told Cole like you got to back off. Like
apparently
you should get out of this right now.
And it was funny too because I saw that in a couple different places. I read an article. I read a lot, right? But then I also saw a video, and in the video it was like a third party relaying, I guess, that they had talked to Schoolboy Q, and they were like, and the way he explains things, he's funny. So the picture that they were painting was you can only imagine what that warning must have been like for, like, and what that conversation might have been like, because I guess in real life, Q's a pretty funny guy. But it's interesting how all of it's evolved, how quickly it did, and then how you had the mainstream media chime in all across the board. I mean, so many different media forms. There were mainstream media news coverage.
Yeah.
I want to say there was I forget because the roast of Tom Brady was so long and I didn't get to watch all of it, but I'm pretty sure there was some call outs early in that. I know
To the beef?
WWE, yeah,
Oh wow.
like one of the
Well, I guess
roasters,
they streamed that live, right? On
yeah,
Netflix like last week. So that makes
yeah.
sense, I guess.
Well, I mean, it even made it into WWE. There were like references of it on I don't know if it was SmackDown or Raw, like in the past week.
Mm.
So, and then look at NBA playoffs. They've been playing Not Like Us like
Oh,
throughout the
really?
playoffs. Yeah, and apparently there's been videos of
Can I just put it on the record that the cover art for Not Like Us is the most savage cover art in all history of hip hop to do that to somebody. That is that
uh
is horrible, but hilarious in some messed up way. But yeah, that album art. When I saw it, I was like, because then I had to look up what those blips mean, because I was like, oh, it's just showing like his crew in the building. And actually, no, I don't even think I looked it up. It was just in one of the videos I watched of somebody's reaction, and people were in the live stream chat like, that's the sex offender like blips they put on the map when you're registered. I was like, dude, what?
yeah, that shit's crazy.
In terms of it being
Yeah.
good for culture, I'm just gonna throw a hot take at it. Is that like, you know, and I mean, you kind of said it yourself to in a certain lens, or you framed it a certain way. If we look at like Logan Paul and Drake being like, Logan Paul to YouTube, but Drake is to hip hop or the music industry, like, would it be better to have that removed off the table so the culture could possibly like thrive differently, moving forward,
It's
like
that's a good one.
considering like
Uh
toxicity to an extent, right? Like removing that from the system, maybe it'll allow the rest of the system to thrive in ways that we couldn't have imagined before.
Well, and it's interesting you bring up system too, but you look at Logan Paul, who is the current United States heavyweight champion in, the WWE, which is arguably the top promotion in professional wrestling, right? And he just got looped into a storyline where he's going to go battle Cody Rhodes, who defeated the longest modern reign champion in Roman Reigns. Throw the ones up for the bloodline. But it's wild because people hate Logan, the audience hate Logan, but because of who he is and the fact that he's the US champ, I mean TKO, the now parent company of WWE, they're milking that for every that cow for everything that they can get out of it because more eyeballs are going on the product. Now you could argue, do you really need that type of negativity? Honestly, I don't know if it's a matter of need so much as what's that old adage, bad press is better than no press.
Yeah,
So
or like any press is good press.
leveraging platforms, getting eyeballs on products, because like let's
Yeah,
go
I mean,
deeper.
if they look at the bottom line and the thing's moving in the right direction and like fuck you pump it for what it's worth, because at the end of the day,
Yeah.
like that's the most important thing in those forms of
Well,
entertainment is like the
try
bottom line.
try to see the and then I guess to try to see the positive on it, right? There's maybe people that are gonna actually go and try to learn more about hip hop and learn more about conscious rap and rap that has social commentary, and maybe that's a way to help bridge divides, make people dive deeper than just like the top 40, so
Mm.
if that's the case, then that's a good thing. And I think using that WWE analogy, there's probably people, because of who Logan Paul is and how he uses his platform, who know more about the sport and the performers and everything that goes into it, and maybe they're taking more out of that. What and I'm a professional wrestling fan, right? Like I've watched it off and on since I was a child. I think it's a fascinating form of storytelling, and it fascinates me why you have stories and genres like that can just capture the attention on such a global scale. And for me as a creative and a storyteller, I'm trying to understand that. Like, what is it? What are the patterns? What are the things that are taking place to be able to do that? Hopefully in a positive, healing way. Like, that's my interest in why you have these things that end up becoming so captivating, because I want to be a part of things that are adding value, creating impact in a positive fashion, adding more healing into the world, right? So that's how I view all these different things. But yeah, sometimes you need let's put it this way, you need the dirty car in order to appreciate when it's sparkling and shiny after it's been cleaned, right?
Mm-hmm. And I mean, in the lens of storytelling, like every story needs its villain.
Yeah,
there is
sure.
no story without the villain. There is no story without the main character needing to do something and accomplish something, you know, and the villain is the guy who's preventing him from doing it, right? So I don't know. But again, I just stick to my, like, the higher you rise, the harder you fall. And I think Drake's potentially on track for a pretty brutal fall, because he's already getting brutalized by Kendrick Lamar. And I'm just excited because one thing I didn't mention, you know, I said earlier that I've been pretty much a Drake fan throughout his career, up until about 2 weeks ago. But Kendrick has always been, in my opinion, one of the best rappers ever. And like my favorite show that I ever went to was when he came here at Blaisdell and performed Good Kid, Mad City. It was the best show I ever been to. Like, I still think he is one of my favorites. I think he's top 5 for sure for me, top 3 possibly, but Drake doesn't even make my top like 10 as a hip hop artist, you know.
Well, Kendrick's always been consistent too, and I think that's something that's pretty cool about him. Everyone, like even his mixtapes, right? Like, there were, before he dropped Good Kid, Mad City, if you go back and you look, he's always had tracks that had a lot of depth to them, and he harnessed that and shared that out. I think for Drake, you know, the depth was few and far between. I mean, he made catchy music. He made stuff that people could go and, you know, put on repeat, but it's kind of mindless, you know. It's like going and having fast food versus like that really good home cooked meal, you know. And there's a place in the world for both. And sometimes you know, there are some fast or medium fast or restaurant food that can be, you know, good or provide sustenance, but nothing beats that home cooked a meal with depth, right? And whether that be being able to converse with who prepared it, or the memories that you're sharing with the people that you're having that with, or even if it's by yourself, if you made something and you feel super stoked on it. So I think that's what artists like Kendrick and so many other really interesting artists, and I think that too, when I look back at my life and I kind of see the characters, the heroes, if you will, in the public eye that I've been drawn to, it would make sense, right? Because you know me at this stage, I'd say, you know, pretty well. I'm seeking that kind of soulful depth and experience. So it's pretty cool that more people are going to get introduced to an artist like Kendrick Lamar, and hopefully people will learn from this and be better humans, you know.
I hope that as well.
It could be the cautionary tale of Drake one day, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I'd be surprised if we ever saw another like artist in the hip hop category sit on top for 10 years like that. No one has done that. Not the way he did, especially as social media gained more traction, attention spans got shorter, like all the different variables that have occurred throughout that decade span, and like being able to adapt to that. That's the other thing I was saying too, was like, whether you're a fan of his or not, whether you like his bars or not, you like his music or not, there's one thing that is objectively true, that whatever formula they developed over the 10 years was incredibly successful. Like, that's objective truth. Like,
and he was relevant for so long. Now, taking a pause for a moment, going back to Kanye or Ye, one could argue that there's the blueprint for making a powerful comeback, because I mean, didn't Vultures hit #1? Or it had, like, when it was released, that first one. So, and he's relaunched his clothing line, rebranded it, and he's following through at least with the idea of everything's only going to be $20. Like
Yeah,
when
yeah,
they
yeah.
released this whole second thing.
He did a Super Bowl commercial, the most in a way that nobody has ever done before, ever. Which was basically the entire budget went to paying for the commercial, and then the rest of it was shot on his phone.
Yeah, I
It's
mean,
crazy. And he just said, like, yay, what do you say? Yay.com, everything $20, pretty
well,
much.
you know,
He's still a cultural icon, though. That's the thing. Like, musically, he might not be near, like, as, like, impactful as he was even, like, a decade ago. Even with, like, was it Twisted? Was it Dark
oh,
what?
My Beautiful Dark Twisted
Yeah,
Fantasy.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Like, even at that point, I think, like, that was around the time he was probably in his peak, maybe, like, as a creative, like, musically, as a hip hop
Yeah,
artist and a producer. Like, that might have been around the time he was starting to hit his peak. But he's still, like, he became he became a fashion icon, for whatever reason. That's not my thing, like, this is my, like, usual attire. So, like, the whole world of fashion is completely other dimensional to me. But, he is still, to this day, he's a fashion icon for whatever
he's
reasons.
he's a he's a really interesting one. I mean, honestly, he could be one more controversy again from crashing and burning and getting canceled. But for some reason with him, and maybe it's because he's just one of those true creative geniuses, like, he's always going to find a way, I think, to come back out of it. And that's the question that we have for Drake. Is
Well, this
Drake
is the thing, real quick. Sorry, this is jumping out to me, though. When it comes to Ye, we have all subscribed to, whenever Ye starts acting out, we just look at Ye and go, like, it's just Ye being crazy again. Like, it's been like that for, like, 15 years at least. Like, we've already subscribed to
true?
him being a nut job, but that's okay, because that's just Ye.
Well,
But we'll still wait to see what he drops next, whether it's music, shoes, like, clothing, like, whatever it is, whatever out of pocket Instagram post he's gonna do. Like, we still, like, crave to see what he's gonna do next.
well, and it's documented his struggles with mental health, right?
Yeah,
Like, so
that's true.
whether or not
That is
he's on
true.
his medication, now granted, I'm sure there's some publicity stunts that were done unmedicated and unmedicated, but it's interesting with him because I think because he was always a little bit edgy from the beginning,
From the very
where
beginning, dude.
whereas he was always all over the place, right? And he was one of those people who, he was a producer, but he wanted to be the rapper, so he worked
Mhm.
at it, and then he ended up becoming, at one
And he
point,
got turned down at
the
the
#1
at the
rapper.
role many times by his icons, who he ended up, basically producing and rapping on all their tracks later. Like, Hove didn't like, he wanted to rap at Rockefeller, like, from the beginning, but they didn't want him to do that. They just wanted him to make beats, and then he became, like, basically the face of Rockefeller at one point. So
Yeah, it's it remains to be seen with Drake.
like, you can't really
And
just let somebody just, it's Drake being a pedo again, like, it's like, whatever. Like, you can't
you're right.
that
Yeah,
just doesn't slide under the radar. Like, you don't get that
no,
pass. That is not a pass, as it should
yeah.
not be ever. you know
Well, and that's why it's
It's
going to
just
be
him being
interesting to
creepy
see.
again, maybe. And that is actually something that has transpired over this time period, is like, oh, Drake's, like, that's cringy, like, Drake being cringy, but, like, now you don't get away with that no more. You don't
Yeah.
get away with the cringy shit that he did
Well,
before,
if
whether it was a
anything,
joke or not. Like, you just
i-
don't get that pass.
if anything, all the stuff before is, I think, magnified. Like,
Amplified. Yeah, I
it's
agree.
viewed in a
That's the
new
problem,
light.
right? Like,
And
now everybody's like, oh, now everything is in question now, and
well,
that's the
w-
part that I'm like, I
what do
don't
you
see
think?
where'd you come out of that, like, in a positive way.
And bringing that up, it takes me back to Not Like Us, and then the part where Kendrick starts talking about Atlanta. There were two things I found interesting about that. I mean, there is that line, "You're not a colleague, you're a colonizer," right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's another one too, where I think it's going to be hard to come back from. Granted, we live in an era where at some point, I'm sure somebody is going to take the money and do a feature with him or bring him on for a feature, right? So he's probably going to collaborate with people in the future. But I think what was interesting, and you and I talked about the authenticity versus the entertainer aspect of things, right? Now, you can be a very, very talented entertainer, but that's not who you are as a person. And I think when you're able to merge truly who you are with what people are seeing, or show elements of that and amplify it, that's really cool. But one really interesting, Atlanta name that was left out of all of that was Gucci. And granted, I don't know how much Drake has done with Gucci, but remember what I was saying? Like, I read Gucci Mane's his autobiography, and he goes into the chapter where he talks about when he was accused of murdering somebody, or like that whole thing, and it was like one of the shortest chapters in the book, and it's because he couldn't talk about it. But basically, everyone knows that, like, and people would call Gucci the boogeyman, right? Like, don't fuck with Gucci, like, he will kill you. You know what I mean? And so I thought it was kind of interesting from the standpoint of like who Kendrick was firing at, and then he left Gucci out of that equation, which was one kind of thing that I thought was interesting. But then going back to it, the way he painted that picture so eloquently to history, and then how it kind of went, and just seeing people go at Drake. I mean, the first verse was fired on Metro and Future's, album, right?
Yeah,
like
like
if
that.
we really revive how, like, go back to how all this began, that's where it all,
as far
like,
as
that's
Kendrick's
where
entry
this
point
era
into
began.
it. Yeah.
At
Because
least
everybody
this
was already
chapter,
coming at Drake at that point.
at least in this chapter, right? But then that like opened all these other things too. So yeah, it's wild.
Yeah, that's the thing too, because like I don't think him dropping all those names from Atlanta wasn't really like calling any of them out or dissing them. He was just kind of like,
oh, for sure.
it was
I didn't
basically
take it that way at all.
he was like turning them all against Drake for the most part. Like
I didn't take that all, but I did think that it was interesting, and I guess it got me thinking like, oh, I wonder if like in the circles, or in like, I wonder if like Kendrick didn't name Gucci out of respect.
Gucci's like yeah.
Yeah,
There's
you know what I
definitely
mean?
there's always gonna be those rules, regardless of what it is or what it relates to. There's always gonna be rules of engagement, and that could very well be one of those things. Like you don't talk about Gucci like that, But
So
he might have just not made the list to begin with, so we don't really know. It's all speculation.
you said something really interesting there. Now, there's always going to be those rules. So when you were like, honestly, in my opinion, you're still an MC. But when you were actively creating like music for public consumption, right? Were you trained, or did people explain things to you like, all right, if you're going to go into a beef, this is the protocol, or if you're going to do this is like the way that you go about it?
No, I wouldn't say.
Interesting.
No, because there was never a point where like that was even ever going to be something I would be interested in pursuing anyway. So I never really needed to be shown those ropes. But I mean, if you observe it close enough, especially when you're in it, like, putting your heart into your own, part of the craft, you observe pretty closely, and you start to see the general rules for sure, but I'm sure like when you get to those levels, somebody will let you know, like, hey, this what you do and you don't do. But as we can see, like, most of those rules have been completely blown out the window. Like,
True.
all of those rules don't apply right now. Like, so like we are at this, and going back to the whole Pusha thing, right? When he exposed Adonis, when he did that, everybody felt the way about him exposing Drake like that. Everyone's like, you don't do that. Like, that's, you don't do that. You don't bring people's family into it like that. And now look at where we're at. Like,
Yeah.
my goodness. But again, like Pusha didn't have that credibility that Kendrick does. He didn't. I mean, Pusha's a great artist. I mean, and he'll go at you. He will go at your throat. But he's not Kendrick. Only Kendrick could do this and like break all the rules. No one's even like, dude, like, you don't do that. Like, whatever Kendrick's doing, no, not very many people are like, you don't do that. Like, everybody's like, ooh, damn, like, what? Like, that's crazy for it to be like that right now.
Yeah. Well, wasn't Push's entry due to the fact Drake went at Pharrell? So
Yes,
in
that was part of it, and
it's
he
a
was
little
going
bit
at good
different.
music too. Like he was
Yeah.
doing some out of pocket shit in relation to like
So
Kanye and like good music too.
so I think that's different, you know. In this case, like that's somebody stepping in, and I mean Pharrell should have took a page out of Metro's book and made the beat and gave it up to everybody.
Oh,
But
I want to go back to that actually, the BBL Drizzy thing, because it was already and like no, just like as a tactic, right? Like it was already kind of crazy to watch a producer get involved in a beef. Like that's
yeah,
already new on its own. But one thing that I didn't think about until you were talking about BBL Drizzy earlier was like what a genius ploy to like turn everyone that isn't even famous against him. Like what to build out an incentive like that.
mm.
Here's the beat. This best Drake disc gets a free beat
and
from me.
isn't it like 10K too, like 10K
Yeah,
and
something like that. But
and
like,
a free beat?
how
That's crazy.
insane of a tactic is that? It's one thing to make a beat and like, oh, like make fun of Drake in like in the vocal samples and stuff, but like to
But
encourage the entire world who raps to diss this dude and incentivize them by saying, "I'll give you a free beat and 10 grand or whatever" from Metro fucking Boomin. Like,
yeah,
what a strategy to like continue to further bury this dude. He's done. He's
they
done.
basically have crowdsourced the beef now, which
Exactly.
is another
Crazy.
thing that can only happen now.
In
Now, I think
2024, too.
from a historical context, and granted, I was really young when Ice Cube dropped No Vaseline, but from a historical context, these kind of harsh going back and forth at each other has existed for some time. I think it's magnified based on the world we live in with technology, the tools people have. So, you know, at the end of it, just hope that nobody gets killed or hurt. And if Drake really is these things, then there's some kind of accountability like called in question. Now, if he's not, you know, and it's blown out of proportion, and really what it is, it's an attack on someone who just is really arrogant that a lot of people are not cool with, and I guess in some way their attitude comes across a bit like bullying in the industry. Like Drake's a petty bully in a way, you know, like he can get away with talking shit and
Yeah.
going at people, right? So maybe this is an opportunity for him to turn the page and come back out and give a heartfelt apology and, you know, try something new. But who knows? We're just gonna have to see how it plays out. I mean, going back to the Metro thing, I don't think anyone's been awarded yet as the winner of that. So then that's going to be another chapter. Maybe it's like a small chapter in this story. And then if Kendrick's album includes any other type of references, then that's another part of it. You know, and
I
then
think I'm
whatever
gonna
Drake
predict
ends up
that
doing.
when Kendrick's album drops, he doesn't even reference to this beef one bit, or if anything, he might drop a bar saying something about like how he off somebody, but he won't like give Drake that shine in his full length project. That's just like the type of artist I believe Kendrick to be. It's like he already bodied him and dedicated however many tracks he did and all that energy. Like when it comes to his body of work, that is whatever the concept is already that he's running with, that will be the concept for that. And I don't think he'll do too much. He definitely won't reference Drake and OVO directly, like by name, I don't think, in his album.
Yeah.
He might use some like ambiguous bars saying about how he like buried some top dude or some shit like that. But yeah, I
Well,
think Kendrick is a type to like, that's part of his integrity as a rapper, I think. Like
you know where
as a master craftsman, I'd say.
hey, the work is done. He's moving on. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think then where that leads me is Drake is like a
He's not petty
corporate.
like Drake. Like Drake would do that. Drake
Yeah.
would be talking about it in his next album. Like,
Well,
Kendrick is vicious and incredibly skilled, but like he doesn't strike me as like what's what I say the other day in hip hop terms, what they would say is like having female characteristics. Like Kendrick ain't like that,
uh,
you know?
yeah. I guess then another thought, at least in terms of how this book and the many books that have been written in hip hop culture is playing out. I'm curious, like, what's gonna happen to Drake's sponsorships?
Yeah,
Like,
me too.
you
I'm
know, look at Nocta with Nike. That's pretty huge, and Nike's invested a lot in that relationship.
Yeah. But if it's
He's
bad for them, they would
Yeah,
rather invest the extra money and lose to get out of it than they would to have to bleed it out slowly,
for sure.
Like that's the thing
I
with big brands, like
well,
multi-billion dollar brands. They'll pay the money to get out of it, just to cut
and
ties. So
how about the Toronto Raptors? I mean, he's technically on their payroll, right? As like a chief officer of some kind of random thing.
yeah,
So
something to do with like marketing or something like that, right? Like I dude, I don't
who
know,
knows?
dude. Ripple
Yeah.
effects unbeknownst to us, honestly. But
So we're gonna see all this stuff play out, and I think it goes to your point over a matter of years because these kind
this
of
is the straw
allegations,
that
right?
broke the camel's back, potentially, is what we may be witnessing that right now. And
True.
Kendrick is that straw.
Unless unless it's gonna kind of be like with the Diddy thing where like Cassie came out with a lawsuit. So maybe someone's gonna come out with a lawsuit against Drake, and then
Oh, yeah,
that's
yeah,
sort of
yeah.
like what will propel it. But
Well, then,
man,
yeah.
who knows? It's crazy. Like on the one hand, it is good for hip hop. On the other hand, I could see why figures like Questlove and Black Thought would have the opinions that they do, and so it's just being a part of a living, breathing art form that the elements of it have been embedded within, I think, mainstream consciousness and popular culture.
Mhm.
I'm born and raised. I've lived my whole life, in the Hawaiian Islands, right? But rap is popular here. We have Hawaiian rappers. Like when I was coming of age, we had Sudden Rush, and Sudden Rush was out there, like leading the way and doing different things. And so
Immerse, baby.
it's it's crazy.
The
And I was
Humanakas.
just well, I was just watching some interview with a Japanese rapper too. He was talking about his experience, and then I mean in Iran right now, actually, to take it kind of like to the world stage, there's a rapper who released a song and then was later incarcerated because of
Yeah,
this
and then
the
they
song.
released him and then they sentenced him to death.
Yeah,
Didn't they? Yeah.
and that's wild. So as flawed and as challenged as where we are is, there's
Well, still
still.
yet, how blessed are we to even be able to like have this conversation
Yeah,
in the
exactly.
comfort of our homes and like bombs not going off outside, or like people who
Yeah,
are sharing their craft like that are ending up getting sentenced to death,
yeah,
or like how, I don't know, like the world has never been perfect and it never will be, and like I still believe that like it's still probably the best time to be alive, if you are able to have the right perspective on and outlook on life. Like
yeah,
people live longer, we have cures for most diseases, like what more like what more could we want,
yeah.
and that's a loaded
No,
question, obviously, but you get my point.
no, I get it, and you're right. It comes down to ultimately perspective, and I think it's worth it to have that perspective where you're always looking for the silver lining, but to something that I mentioned earlier, it's creating that space for gratitude,
Yep.
and I really think that that's the
100%.
foundation, and that's where it grows from.
Like even my
And
statement was rooted in gratitude of saying like how blessed are we to like how grateful am I to like
yeah,
be able to do this right now, like
yeah, No, and likewise, I'm super stoked. I mean, we were trying for half an hour. We're at an hour and 15 minutes, and I feel
Yeah.
I feel blessed that you took time out of your busy schedule because I know you're still troubleshooting. Hopefully, your drive is doing well, and it's cool to be able to
I'm
just
like over
hold
here like
space.
nah,
Yeah,
I
you got
think
to practice the Nintendo method.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna just do it for the comedy of it. I swear if it works, we're gonna have another call and we'll talk about some other ridiculous stuff then.
There you go. But yeah, I guess any closing thoughts to tie this all together?
Not really. I mean, I feel like I've shared my extremely opinionated thoughts in terms of, I just don't think there's coming back from it. I'm not saying none of it's possible, but if I were to have my opinion, I don't think Drake comes back from it. And honestly, I think the ripple effects that follow this in the coming months is going to shock us all probably. And then my other thoughts in terms of Kendrick, I think he may be done. I think he probably understands that he won, especially after Drake's last drop, Heart Part 6, which also is a play on Kendrick's series of his tracks named The Heart, Part 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So like also very unoriginal approach to even just naming the track. Like, I don't know, I guess I was supposed to be a jab, but I feel like that was just not thoughtful at all. But I think Kendrick drops an album over the summer. I don't think he does too much mentioning of this beef. Not much at all. Definitely not mentioning Drake by name. I don't think in his album. That's my guess. And I think it becomes his best-selling album ever, or most streamed album ever. And my last thing for Drake is he's got, I think, about a month window or two where he could drop a few tracks or a few songs and people will still juice him and listen to him because they're going to be curious to know what he has to say. But if he tries to just veer off from this beef and like just pretend like things never happened, that's not going to end well for him, in my opinion. Like, I just don't see that happening.
We should probably wrap this, but
Yeah.
that brings me to a question.
That's my closing. Like,
what if
too lazy don't read?
what if Drake comes out and he's like, yeah, you know what, I lost, I got my ass kicked,
but I ain't no pedophile. Because if I was, I would have been arrested. Because that's what he says in the song. If I was having sex with young girls, I would have been arrested. I'm way too famous for this shit, or something like that. Like, I think one of the things I've learned in like all my negotiation studies from Chris Voss is like to address the negative is to amplify the negative. So to admit or to deny the guilt is to amplify the thing you're being accused for to begin with. Also, in a lot of times admitting your guilt in that situation when you deny your guilt. But I don't know. Sorry, I'll stop now.
No worries. I mean, that's all fair. Kendrick, he might have taken a career, the life of a career, and that's powerful. And it's
he's
not
the
something
guy
to
who
take
could
for
do
granted,
it. Yeah, he is the
and
guy to do it.
Well, and that's why it reminds me of the nuke. People out there. People out there in general, there's all kinds of information that folks will have, good, bad, otherwise, about people in a public space that could really wipe things out.
I've heard some messed up truths about some very famous rappers that come from a certain city that are horrible, dude. Like, horrible. Like, and yeah. I don't know. I'll just leave it at that. So like all the stuff that came out about Drake from Kendrick, none of it surprised me. The thing that surprised me about it was that Kendrick was the one who blasted him for it. That was the thing that surprised me. It wasn't the allegations and the accusations. It was the who was doing it was like, damn. Like my friend had said too, like my friend my friend who's the engineer who owned the studio that I recorded all my music with, he was the one who said, like, because I said that exact thing to him. I was like, it's not the accusations that are surprising to me. Like none of that surprises me at all because of so much of the other messed up shit I've heard about what happens in at least in that tier of hip hop. But like, it was the fact that Kendrick was doing it, and then my friend had mentioned like, you know, yes, that part was surprising, but you could tell. Well, this is what his thoughts were. It's like you could tell that Kendrick was still like dialing it back to not expose too much because he probably doesn't want to get killed over it from somebody that has nothing to even do with Drake in particular, you know? So it seemed like he kept it pretty aligned and like laser guided at Drake and OVO, because if he branched out of that, there could have been a lot of eyebrows raised and questions asked about much other layers of the onion in terms of the hip hop industry and music and entertainment industry, you know?
I think what you just described, it reminds me of when I worked in politics. What I saw was a picture into the microcosm and the macrocosm. So all the stereotypes, all the crazy things that you could think about in politics, backroom deals, politicians taking advantage of aides, like doing just really unethical things, all 100% real. Now, it's only worse on a larger scale. And so I think what you just brought up is what's fascinating about it is if Kendrick was just shining the light in one corner, just the seeds that are planted or the awareness of people like looking more critically at everyone in the industry is really going to be interesting. And that could be the lasting repercussions of this.
And it still could be, honestly. It still could be. Because we'll see. Because who knows? Like, if things blow up in Drake's face even further about those accusations, who knows what who's he going to take down with him now? Especially now that the entire industry's turned against him, you know?
Yeah.
So, like, who is he to hold, like, who is he to be loyal to at that point? You know, like, him and his whole crew getting exposed, potentially going under investigation, going to trial, all those things. Like, he has no ties at that point to, like, keep his mouth shut for anybody.
So,
you know?
So does he become like Tekashi?
I don't know. That's what I'm saying.
You know?
Like, I think, again, the ripple effects of these accusations on Drake in the coming months is going to shock us all. Like, you know, I hadn't even had those thoughts in my head about him blowing the whistle on everyone else if he gets taken down. But, like, that is in this, looking at it from a game theory standpoint, like, that is entirely possible to happen, you know, but who knows? I got no crystal ball right here. You know, it's just my fluffy microphone.
You just took me into like some kind of random conspiracy theory, but like, what if like Drake turns, state's witness, right, and then helps bring down Diddy, which then causes the domino effect of all these different things, you know, or vice versa.
He will get his ass killed if he does that. He will end up dead if he brings down the entire industry like that. So that's the thing. Those are the dark sides of things that none of us understand at all. That, you know, the rules of engagement. Like, I'm sure that's a fucking rule that you do not do that. You do not, like, you could bat off one-on-one or your clique against another clique, but like, you do not go against the entire system like that and expect to walk away from it. So again, we'll just see. We'll just see.
Yeah, we know the outcome of that, and the outcome is it's never good when someone thinks that they're bigger than the game itself. Well,
Kendrick has the power and skills, and just he's positioned to take somebody out like Kendrick or like Drake. Drake could be the guy who's positioned to try and actually take down an entire industry as well with him. You know, so we shall see.
Yeah, 20 years from now, it'll be an interesting movie. And
6 months from now, we'll probably do a follow-up about all this and see how accurate my predictions were.
We should. And the documentaries, I think that'll come from all of this too. It'll be fascinating in the years ahead. So
they do a Aubrey movie. Meet the Grams becomes a TV show on HBO Max.
Oh my God. So yeah, I'm curious to see where this leads. And
so am I, dude. Me and you will be going back and forth about it until it
for sure
reaches its ultimate conclusion, which may be not for a long time. I think it will reach it eventually, but just like not for a while.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's too fresh right now. But I appreciate you taking the time. We went an hour beyond what we thought we would, which is super awesome.
Nice.
If you're still listening and you made it this far, mahalo, and
For real,
thank
thank
you.
you.
Yeah,
To
but
listen to this Portuguese ramble.
nah, thanks for being out there. I'm gonna cut it here, and we'll catch you later.
Shoots, guys. Thank you.
Shoots.
Act like you don't know me. These